Meet who? My words came out a little breathlessly as I stared, almost enchanted at the feather as it lit up under the light. I'd never thought to hold it that close to a lamp. Your grandfather, Alexander replied softly. He returned the feather to my hand and wrapped his arms around my waist to tug me into his chest, surrounding me in a circle of warmth and protection. You know who my grandfather is? I asked in wonder. I know who that feather belongs to, a gramo, Alexander replied, nodding his head towards the feather in my hand. He explained, angel wings are very distinct, unique, so separate feathers are often easy to recognize as belonging to a certain angel. That one. Another nod to the feather in my hand. The wings it belongs to are very distinct indeed, and well known amongst the supernatural community. Somehow, Alexander didn't sound very happy about it, though. He looked almost troubled. Weren't angels good? So how could the thought of this particular angel trouble him? Who is he, Alexander? I would like to meet him. The thought of having another relative alive was making my heart speed up. Maybe it wasn't just Hay and I on this world after all, although we now had a family with Alexander, of course. He's the Regis of South America, a Gramocroi, Alexander said, as if that explained everything. Regis? There's several major territories, each led by a Regis. All the Regis together sit on a council. They are the most powerful, oldest, and their will is absolute, Alexander explained slowly. So, in essence, the Regis rule the world? I asked. Alexander nodded. Once, long ago, it was the angels that each occupied a Regis position. They were called archangels then. But the last 25,000 years, other creatures have stepped up to take Regis positions. 25,000 years? God, the supernatural history of the world was long, and probably filled with a lot more accurate details than what I had to learn during history in school. Wait, didn't Alexander once mention territories as well? Something about Thornton going after his? You're a Regis too, aren't you? You're the Regis of North America? I asked, experiencing a moment almost like the light bulb moments in cartoons. The revelation came so suddenly, Alexander chuckled softly. Yes, I am a Gramocroi. No wonder Luke fainted. So why did you look troubled when you found out my grandfather is a Regis as well? Is that a problem? Is he a mean man? I asked in a hurry. At the thought of Luke, I realized that particular vampire was dead now. Dead because he dared touch me. No, I just find it hard to grasp how he could impreg Alex, a woman in my territory, without my knowledge. He's also been in your home several times, or you wouldn't have found one of his feathers. It means he either has powers I'm not aware of, or the people in that particular area are more corrupt. Then I thought, oh, I see. Hey, if Thornton is using this excuse that he has to punish Deidre by killing Bob to make a play for your territory, where is he from then? I wondered. Fast thinking, a Glamokoi. Thornton is the Regis of Western Europe. His seat of power lies in London, Alexander replied. So that time you spend in London, when you picked up the British accent, you spend under Thornton's rule? At that, he shook his head. No. At that time, another Regis ruled Western Europe. Thornton and I served Raziel together. When Thornton killed her and took over her territory, I left for America, where I carved out my own territory. With an almost proud look on his face, he said, I'm the youngest known Regis to have managed such a large territory and create stability. Which brought on the question, how old are you exactly? I was born in 532 AD. You do the math, a Gramochoi. Fuck me, he was old. I thought at the most 600, but damn, that was almost 1,500 years, and Bob was even older. Wow, even Sarah was almost that old, but she didn't behave any different from the rest of the teenagers I knew. So how old is Thornton then? And more importantly, how old is my grandfather? Thornton is a vampire like me, and my guess is that he's about 5,000 years old. He's been the Regis of Western Europe for nearly 500 years. Your grandfather? I don't know how old he is, a Gramochoi, but old, very old indeed. He's the oldest Regis alive on the council, which is why I am so surprised to find out he fell in love with your grandmother. At his age, emotions, especially those of a human, become to mean less. Things fade. It was commonly thought that he is so old that he's lost all appetites of the flesh, both carnal and sustenance. But I'm the living proof of how wrong that thought is. I nodded, understanding things better now. I would still like it if you could tell me his name. I can't go around calling him Regis now, can I? Alexander started guiding me out of the bedroom so we could make our way to the kitchen for food. Yes, I suppose not. His name is Talanextic. The name that rolled off his lips was very foreign and strange, and when I tried to say it just the way Alexander had, which sounded almost natural, I found myself tripping over my tongue. Great. No wonder Alexander just kept saying grandfather or Regis. Still lost in thought, we reached the kitchen where I had another shock. Deidre was sitting at the table with Andy in her lap. She looked like a real ice princess, if not for the softening of her eyes every time she looked at my brother. Behind her stood another tall man, fair yet heavily muscled. He looked like a real Nordic warrior. The image only enhanced by the thick golden locks that fell becomingly around his face and the heavy leather jacket with beautiful Nordic scrollwork in gold on it. I could easily see this man wielding a set of mean-looking battle axes or a huge great sword while wearing chainmail. This was a man that bathed in blood, yet I didn't think he was a vampire. I just couldn't figure out what he was. Not a shapeshifter? He didn't contain the lethal aura of a predator, at least not the way Fort or Jaden did. Nor did he have that certain stillness about him, the slightly offbeat breathing pattern that always seemed to accompany vampires. Except Alexander, he was a master in appearing human, deadly, beautiful but human. Witches weren't immortal, so it couldn't be that either. There was no doubt that this man had lived like a Viking. The only other creatures I knew of were angels and demons, and since he had no wings nor red eyes, Samuel, Alexander said from beside me, confirming my suspicion that this was the warrior my mate had sent to retrieve Deidre. My lord, the blonde Viking nodded respectfully. Please tell me you'll end this foolishness and quit playing school. His voice had a slightly lilting accent, the way only the Nordic people spoke, and it was very pleasant to listen to. Yes, my impatient friend. I suppose it is time we ended the charades once more, Alexander nodded. He sounded a little tired and sad all of a sudden, and I immediately reached out to wrap a hand around his, showing him my support. Deidre, a nod in the redhead's direction that was on the edge of being disrespectful. Alexander strode past everyone and straight to the cupboards, ripping them open in search for something to eat for me. What would you like, a gramocroy? Oh, I'll fix something. Anyone else hungry? Danis immediately exclaimed, pushing Alexander aside when he lifted a pan off the stove and sniffed at it suspiciously. Never let a man who doesn't eat fix you food. Brittany, it'll taste gross. Amen to that, Eli, Jaden said warmly from his position by the door. The Nordic warrior suddenly threw back his head and laughed, a loud booming sound. Didn't think I'd see the day the great Alexander Clitton tried to prepare food. Other than seducing a pretty lady for his own meal, his hulking figure shook with mirth. I frowned. Alexander seduced pretty women to feed from? Didn't he say he puts them to sleep? No, that was stupid. You can't just snap your fingers and have a person drop on the spot fast asleep. That would draw attention. Still, there was a bubbling feeling of jealousy in the pit of my stomach that I really didn't like. My mate seducing other women, even if just to feed from them. Everyone had gathered in the kitchen, it seemed, with the panther at the door and Bob leaning against the wall next to it. Sarah at the table staring intently at Deidre, who was holding on to Andy as if he was a lifeline. Then there was Seriton, who stood at the back door, his body turned in such a way that he could watch the room and out the window to the world as well. Which reminded me that I wasn't sure what Seriton was either. He appeared to be a vampire though, but my guess was an old one too, because he was good at hiding it. Very good. It's a good thing you're so bloody good at what you do, Samuel, or I'd have you punished for your insolence, Alexander said, and he sounded completely serious. I would have believed he meant it if not for the faint feeling of amusement that I felt through our bond. Danis, just the sandwich is fine, I said, and made my way over to him so I could hop onto the counter. He shook his head with an amused smile and busied himself making pancakes instead. So, Brittany, how's the sore muscles? Jaden teased from his spot by the door. All better? Ready for another bout of practice? I shot back with a smile, flipping out a knife from the wide holster around my waist. Alexander insisted I started wearing that everywhere, just to make sure I had a weapon on me at all times. No thanks. Maybe you can trick Sammy into it? Jaden replied, flinching melodramatically. Sammy ain't going to play target. Only you're stupid enough to agree to that, you silly cat, the warrior jibed. turning to pierce the panther with a daring look in his sky-blue eyes. As he turned, I realized he was wearing a huge blade strapped to his back. How the hell did I miss that? But when he moved again, it felt like my eyes slid right past the blade and I couldn't see it any longer. What I did notice was the way Alexander had moved along every time, keeping his body between me and the rest of the kitchen's inhabitants. Except Danis, who was right beside me, flipping pancakes on the stove like a pro. Reaching out, I slapped my mate in the back of the head playfully. Stop that, okay? We're at home and there's enough testosterone-filled men here to protect me, seriously. He spun around so fast to pin me against the cupboards behind me that all I saw was a momentary blur. His hands blazing against me as he cupped my face, crowding my space with his body until I felt surrounded. We had an agreement, Britt. You would not fight me or complain when it concerns your protection, he said, his voice low and saturated with his Irish ancestry. He was deadly serious and not at all amused with my flippant attitude. I huffed at him, blowing some strands of hair out of my face. Oh, shush. Do you want me to make you lose control again tonight? I whispered teasingly. But when pretty much everyone in the room gasped, I realized they could all still hear me. Stupid, sensitive hearing. To my surprise, Alexander started laughing. I would never say no to what you just offered, a gramo huawi. Are you embarrassed now? There was more laughter around the room as my cheeks turned the brightest red so far. So I hit him again. Not nice, Alexander. I like her, Alex. She's got spunk, said Samuel, suddenly standing behind Alexander and clapping him hard on the shoulder. Then the Viking turned his sky-blue eyes on me. Hey kid, I'm Samuel Asbertson. Keep him in line for us, will ya? Leaning forward to look more closely at the man over Alexander's shoulder. I nodded. Yeah, of course I will. Was it me, or did Samuel's eyes almost glow? They looked so blue that they almost appeared celestial. Was he an angel after all? What are you? The question fell from my lips before I could stop myself. Alexander turned around, giving me his back, and I happily leaned forward against him, wrapping my legs around his waist. Samuel looked at Alexander and something was communicated between them before he smiled gently. There's many creatures in this world you don't know of, kid, but I'll humor you this once. I'm a titan. A titan? What the hell was a titan? Weren't they some kind of giants? Before I could ask, though Samuel whirled around, giving me a clear view of that huge blade on his back if only for a second. Then it was impossible to see it again. Any more jobs you want me to do, Alex? No? Then I'm out of here. I have a pile of things to catch up to. He was already striding over to the back door. Actually, I do, Alexander called out, and the tall blonde man stopped in his tracks. Great, what now? I want you to go to Telanicstick with an invitation. His words made everyone in the kitchen freeze in their tracks. Come again, Alex? The Viking asked, his blue eyes definitely sparking to live with an eerie light this time. I knew I wasn't imagining it. Alexander tugged me off the counter onto his back and carried me till he was right in front of Samuel. Hand him this, and tell him there's 2 people that wish to see him when he has time. It's important. Tell him I know. Alexander had taken a silver coin from his pocket and handed it to Samuel, somehow still supporting me with one hand. Are you sure, Alex? The Titan asked as he examined the coin in his hand. Was that concern I heard in the hulking guy's voice? Yes. A pause. Good luck, Sam. Be careful out there. I have a bad feeling. You and your feelings, Samuel muttered as he stepped out the door and disappeared into the slowly falling night. Within a few strides, he was swallowed up by shadows. Telanicstick? Really, Alex? Why would you want anything to do with the Regis of South America? He gives me the chills, that one colder-than-ice princess over there, Jaden said, nodding at Deidre. She looked up to glare at the panther but quickly turned to hide her face behind Andy when that meant she had to look at Bob too. So my grandfather really was a cold person? It seemed like everyone here was afraid of him, except Alexander, I supposed. It didn't help that he was troubled when he thought of Telanicstick. I was starting to think I was better off not knowing who my grandfather was. I think we all need pie again. Andy's voice suddenly cut through the tense silence. With a frown, I nodded. Yeah, I think you're right, Giant. Oh, I was a getting beneath thing I have our held to view. My member held as I was a getting me taste. I was a getting me talk with Deidre in private. He was absolutely convinced that Deidre would try to either kill me or kidnap me or something. I took Deidre with me to Alexander's study because I knew that room was soundproof even to shifter and vampire hearing. Dennis only came along for a few minutes to light up the fireplace with a softly muttered spell and hand me a cup of steaming hot chocolate. Deidre indeed looked like royalty. The way she sat down on one of the chairs and smoothed her hands over her fitted leather pants as if she wore a ball gown. Her chin turned upwards the slightest bit and her shoulders and back straight, giving me a clear view of her pale but delicate throat. Now that I knew how much Andy had instantly taken to her, I could see the signs better. She wore this cold ice princess demeanor like an armor, and if that didn't work, she became the sultry seductress. She turned her liquid silver eyes on me and I had a fleeting look into the woman behind them, just like that very first night I met her. Broken? Yes, so very heartbroken she was. How could one ever expect to mend something like that? What do you wish of me? What is your price for this protection? Deirdre said, her voice steely as if she was preparing for the worst and willing to bargain to her best ability. She had no idea how to deal with me, even though she thought I was only human. No price, Deirdre. I wanted to protect you because I knew it would break Bob if you died. I'm not willing to let that happen, I said, forcing my voice to be gentle. Deirdre was like a skittish animal, and I didn't want to push her in the wrong direction and make her panic or attack. Deirdre's face remained stoic, impassive, but I could feel disbelief pouring out of her. She came from a world where you didn't do things for each other without expecting payment. That much was clear. Before we could continue our conversation, the door opened again, and Andy quickly ran into the room. Sarah, go away. I don't want to go to bed, he squealed as he rushed over to me and dove into my arms. I'm sorry, Brittany, come on. Hey, you shouldn't disturb them, Sarah tried from the doorway with a gentle smile on her face. It's okay, miss. I'll take him to bed myself shortly. No, hey, you're not getting away. When my baby brother struggled to run off again, I wrapped my arms around him tightly. You sure? Sarah asked, but she was already withdrawing from the room, leaving the three of us alone in silence. A silence Andy broke by saying, I don't want to go to MY bed, Ames. Can I sleep with you in that? Your bed is so much bigger. It's good for bouncing. Eh? You'll have to ask Alexander Giant, but I'm sure it's fine, I replied, feeling a little guilty all of a sudden for leaving him in the care of the others so much these past few days. I became aware of Deidre's eyes burning into us as she stared at Andy, who now snuggled into my arms with a content sigh. There was such longing reflected in those mercury orbs of her that I just knew that she'd once lost her own child. It's not safe, Deidre whispered then, and the sound was broken, desperate. It's not safe to keep me here. Thornton will come and he'll hurt you, all of you. But as she looked at Andy, I knew the heart-wrenched words were meant for him. She was terrified that Thornton would hurt Andy. I think we can decide that for ourselves. Alexander would never let any harm befall a child, or any of his family for that matter. He's the most loyal man I've ever met. I paused a moment so that my words sunk into her. Andy took the opportunity to speak again. Read my mind, Brittany. After which he continued mentally. Deidre makes my head heavy again. I don't want her to hurt so bad. She makes Bobby hurt too, and he's already so tired always from trying to stay away from her. Can you fix it? I tried, but nothing works. Bob tired from staying away from Deidre. The images that Andy unintentionally sent along with his thought showed me an all too familiar picture. Immediately, things clicked into place, and I was shocked by the damage it had done to my friend. Look, I don't know what happened between you and Bob, but it's clear that you're both hurting over it. It's making Bob vulnerable, and I don't like seeing him that way, and I don't like seeing you hurt either. Deidre sat up straighter than a ruler as if she was about to rip into me with a vengeance, obviously pissed off that I was interfering with private matters. I raised my hand to stop her. No, let me finish. Surprisingly, she swallowed her words and cast her eyes downwards, her pose suddenly submissive. Alexander and Sarah are both powerful vampires in their own right, I started, and she scoffed a little disbelievingly, obviously thinking I was understating Alexander by ranking him with Sarah. But Bob has virtually no powers. He can't even keep his fangs retracted around humans and is forced to mumble. The others all think it's because he made Alexander and Sarah in one night, but I think that's only partially the truth. Do you agree with me? The way she shifted her eyes and then slumped just a little more into her chair, her composure shot to hell, told me enough. You are mates, aren't you? But you haven't made it yet, and the strain of being apart is draining you both? Especially Bob? Those were well-educated assumptions, and I held my breath after I spoke, hoping I was right. Deidre was quiet for a few minutes while Andy leaned forward in my lap, staring intently at her as if he was urging her to speak. I knew he wasn't mentally reaching out to her, but I did feel a certain reaching. Something warm? Then, the red-haired woman raised her head and met my eyes. Yes, we are mates. But you're wrong. Being unmated would only drain you for a while, then you'd be able to move on. A silence, but I already knew what she was going to say next. We did mate. That's what's draining Bob, because I'm weak and constantly in danger. He's been giving me all of his power, all of it. I tried to stop it. I tried to tell him not to, but... And then the woman broke down and started sobbing, full out and heartbroken sobs. She hid her face in her hands, but I'd already seen the crimson tears. I didn't hesitate to push Andy off my lap and sit down on the armrest beside Deidre so I could pull her into my arms and hug her tightly. Andy followed suit and climbed onto her lap so he could wrap his small arms around her waist. We sat like that for several long minutes while she cried into my shoulder and held Andy to her chest as if he was her long-lost child. Then Andy reached out to me mentally. "Brittany, great, you did it!" I wasn't so sure what and if I did anything at all, but it felt like I'd earned Deidre's trust. Somehow I'd managed to reach behind the cold mask and found the real woman. How can I make things right? I don't want Bob to die. I can't have him die. I don't want to be alone anymore, please. I'll try to help you, Deidre, I promise, and Sarah will too. Whatever it was that happened, I don't believe it's too late. If he's been giving you all of his power for so long, it has to mean that he cares for you still. As if on cue, Sarah came back into the study and joined us near the fire, a glint in her eyes. Let's talk business, girls. We have some major fixing ahead of us. After that, we spent hours and hours talking about the past and the present until I knew why Bob had left her and why they were still apart. Deidre's life was one big tragedy, and the way I heard it, so was Bob's. Even Sarah heard things she had no knowledge of about her own brother. Andy had long since fallen asleep, sprawled out on the thick rug in front of the fire, his soft snores bringing a sense of tranquility to the room. I knew he was happy now. He hated being alone always. And now that we'd given Deidre hope and friendship, I realized that my head too felt much lighter. Carrying Andy in my arms, I made my way up the stairs, flanked by Sarah and Deidre, who were still softly talking to each other. I heard Sarah point out which door was Bob's before they wished me goodnight, and each disappeared into their own rooms. The door to our room was open a crack, I noticed, and when I nudged it open, I saw Alexander seated on the bed, a scattering of papers around him and a frown on his face. When he saw me, his eyes widened a fraction before he flashed over to me so quick that I didn't even see him move. "Is he hurt? What happened?" he asked as he took the sleeping Andy from my arms and hurried to the bed where he gently put him down. The papers stacking themselves neatly without a hand touching them and shifting to an ordered pile on the nightstand. "Nothing, he's just sleeping," I replied. "But he wanted to sleep here tonight and I said yes. Are you okay with that?" His eyes darkened, and then I saw his nostrils flare as he breathed in deeply through his nose. "Britt, then why are you covered in Deidre's blood?" "Because she was crying Alexander, and I comforted her," I replied as I watched Alexander rake his eyes over Andy as if checking for injuries. One hand he reached out to gently move some strands of hair out of Andy's face. "I told you to keep your distance, à gras mon quoi, and I told you to keep those daggers within reach." "Damn it," Alexander Whisper yelled as he pointedly glared at the belt of daggers I had dangling in my hand. It was obvious I'd taken it off against his wishes. "She's no danger to me or Hay, and especially not Bob Alexander," I whispered back as I shrugged out of Alexander's white shirt, stained crimson from Deidre's tears. I threw it in the hamper and quickly washed up in the bathroom where I tugged on proper PJs. Alexander didn't follow me, and he switched to talking with his mime so he wouldn't wake Andy. "Britt, you don't know what she did to Bob. You don't know what happened. So you can't know for sure if she's a threat or not. It's because of her Thornton is threatening all of you now." I shot him a glare. "I do know what happened. That's why it took so long. It's what the three of us have been talking about. ALL night Alexander. Besides, from what I've heard of that Thornton, he would have used any excuse to go after your territory. This is just very convenient. Since I was done in the bathroom, I made my way over to the bed where I saw that Alexander had already changed Andy into his Spider-Man PJs and tucked him in, smack in the middle of the bed. I know, but that doesn't mean she's trustworthy, Britt. Alexander reached out a hand to cup my face gently. I love you, Agormukoyi. I love you too, but now you're trying to change the subject. Deidre is Bob's soulmate, Alexander. You can't deny them being together. It's a part of the reason Bob appears to have no powers. I folded back the blanket and slid in beside Hay. Alexander froze in place and stared at me as if struck by lightning. You are sure about this, Agormukoyi? He spoke out loud, but his voice was very soft as he knelt beside me on the floor, taking one of my hands in his. I saw her mark Alexander, and it's unmistakably Bob's. They mated. I sent him a mental image of the mark I'd seen on Deidre along with my words. Alexander nodded as he stroked his thumb over my hand. It appeared as if he was concentrating hard on that motion, but I knew he was thinking. Planning. He had to figure out what to do about Deidre. Knowing that she was Bob's mate was changing the entire situation. He knew now that he didn't just have to protect Deidre because I wanted it so, but that she was now his family. If she died then, so would Bob, because they had mated. I will talk to Bob, he said. Standing up, he gently kissed my forehead. Sleep well, Agormukoyi. I will be back as soon as possible, forgive me, but work and duty call. I nodded. Take care, Alexander. He had already disappeared out the door whispering close without so much as a sound. Turning, I realized he'd forgotten his stacks of folders and papers which he'd been looking over when he entered. Then, right before my eyes, they simply vanished. Yes, they vanished in thin air. What the? I started to mutter, but I heard a low chuckle echo in my mind. And then Alexander's mental voice. Yes, I just moved the stack of papers Agormukoyi. Don't wait up for me. My head filled itself with his lullaby and images of the beautiful Irish countryside. I guessed they were memories of places Alexander himself had been. Curled up protectively around my little brother, I was soon fast asleep. It was all his brick. When I walk at my ample. And I was cocooned in warmth, and he was still fast asleep, curled up in my arms with his back pressed against me, his head cradled on my arm. Alexander lay behind me with one male thigh pressed up between my legs and his arm thrown over my waist to hold both me and Andy. Morning, Agormukoyi. He breathed softly in my hair, shifting just the tiniest bit to press his chest closer against my back. Morning, Alexander. Was everything okay? Did you talk with Bob? I asked. I was anxious to know what had gone on while I slept last night. A chuckle soft and low, his chest vibrating against me the way it always gave me shivers. The mark was there. Yes, the exact same mark as the one you showed me Deidre has. Bob said he didn't tell us because he knew it would change things for me. He didn't want me to feel responsible for Deidre, and he didn't want me push him into making amends. The silence that followed told me just how hurt Alexander was over the fact that Bob hadn't told him this. I knew he'd never admit it out loud, but it was obvious. I rubbed my fingers over his arm in an effort to show him I was there for him. What's next? We get up and fix you and Andy breakfast, Britt, Alexander replied with a hint of teasing. Sheridan and Jaden have already left on assignments I set for them, and I brought in one of my other Dilsishta to run security here. Since no one is going to school at the moment, we can do with one, and I have some of my people working on arranging homeschooling for Andy. Besides that, I have to run reports and place some visits to other Taoiseach whom I trust less. Samuel reported some disturbances in several states that need checking. My mind was sort of buzzing with that information, because pretty much the only thing I understood from all of that was that Andy was getting homeschooling now. Taoiseach. What the hell were those? Another chuckle, and then Alexander whispered, Taoiseach is Gaelic for chieftain Agormukoyi. It is the title given to the ones who rule a section of my territory for me. It is split up along the state lines, as you know them for the most part, although some territories include several states. He paused before continuing his explanation. Taoiseach Dilsiachta means something like true chieftains or loyal chieftains. Jaden, Samuel, and Sheridan each carry that rank because I trust them implicitly. They do not rule pieces of my territory. Rather, they supervise everything for me. And there are more? Taoiseach Dilsiachta? I asked, wondering how many people over the years had earned his trust so implicitly. even though he'd had to fight so incredibly hard for his survival and that of his siblings. Alexander didn't trust easily, that I knew. There's several more. Yes, you'll get to meet Lysander shortly. He's very competent with security details, and will run the operation here smoothly, even though he's the youngest of my Tawisakta, being only 300 years old. Only 300? I mimicked Alexander with a laugh. He ignored it. I'm afraid I'll be away all day. I have to hurry if I want to visit 7 Tawisich. Danis is going to be run ragged with all the teleporting he'll have to do for me. Danis can teleport? Andy suddenly exclaimed, "That's so cool." Alexander laughed. "Morning at Juman. Most witches can teleport a little. Danis is particularly good at it, though." He tightened his hold for a short moment, hugging the both of us close to him before he let go and slid out of bed. When I turned to look at him, he was already completely dressed, not a hair out of place. "Hey, Alexander. Since you have witch blood in you, does that mean you can teleport as well? Is that what you did with the papers last night?" I wondered. "Yes, gramu croix. Unfortunately, Alexley for Danis. I cannot teleport myself or large objects. Now come, we need to get started with the day. Lysander will train with you today, and I thought maybe Hay would like to learn too. I can be a ninja," Andy exclaimed, rushing out of bed to show off his moves to Alexander. As after goal. I was almost on Usaptors and the Pakistan backfist with Hay and Danis, after which I had to say goodbye to Alexander. He left with a kiss on my forehead and a softly muttered warning that I should still be careful around Deidre. She might be Bob's mate, but that didn't mean she wouldn't betray us to keep him alive or something. Danis made a show of grimacing when he grabbed onto Alexander's shoulder before bowing elegantly. Then, with a wink, they both disappeared from the room. Andy clapped and bounced in his chair. "Do you think I can learn to do that?" "Don't know. We're not witches. Giant, but we have an angel for a grandfather and a demon as a dad, so I'm sure we can do something special." I winked at him as I took his hand to lead him to the training room. In the hall, we met up with Deidre and Sarah, both wearing simple, loose clothing fit for training. "Did Alex order you two to train as well?" I asked them. They nodded, and Deidre flipped her red hair over her shoulder. "I can fight all right. I've had to fight all my life." "Your mate is one pushy guy." "Oh, I know. Let's go, okay. I want to know who this Lysander is," I said. Sarah groaned. "Not Lysander. That bad?" I pushed open the door to the training room and stepped inside, scanning the wide open space for this young Zeech. The room was empty, however, so I shrugged and made my way over to the mats already in place on the floor. The door swung